Imagine waking up in a beachfront shack. The ocean breeze rattling the bamboo, and you're just steps away from water so perfectly turquoise it looks like. Mathematically impossible. You're paying $15 a night. It is the absolute peak of the idealized tropical dream. Now imagine walking down that same beach to get a coffee, passing locals who genuinely deeply believe that the person living next door to them has the power to curse them with a fatal hex. Welcome to Phil and H Travel Is It Worth It? I'm Phil.
And I'm H. And today our mission for this deep dive is to cut straight through the over-filtered, hyper-curated travel influencer content surrounding Siquijor. We are stripping away the aesthetic to look at the hard logistics, the systemic supply chains, the actual costs, and the physical reality of this living witchcraft culture.
Yeah, and there's a massive sense of urgency to this discussion, right? Like there is a ticking clock here. We are trying to answer a very specific question for you. Is 2026 the absolute last chance for you to experience the magic of this island before the machinery of mass tourism just changes its DNA forever?
Right, because to understand that ticking clock, we really have to treat Siquijor as a real-time case study in gentrification. We are watching a destination cart in that incredibly fragile, sort of fleeting window.
It's transitioning.
Exactly. It's transitioning from a high-friction, best-kept secret for backpackers into a really over-commercialized, institutionalized hotspot. And if you understand the macroeconomics of travel, you can actually track exactly where an island is on that timeline.
Okay, well, let's jump straight into the numbers then, because that timeline just accelerated dramatically, didn't it?
Oh, massively.
There is a specific ratio here that should make anyone who understands travel logistics just sit up and pay attention. So, Siquijor has a local resident population of roughly 103,000 people, but it is currently receiving approximately 273,000 tourists every single year.
Just think about the physical implications of that for a second. That is nearly a 3-to-1 ratio of temporary visitors to permanent residents.
Right. I mean, picture the city you live in right now. Now imagine the tourist population being triple your local population.
It's what?
The sheer physical weight of that on an island's infrastructure is just mind-boggling.
Yeah.
And yet, despite that massive influx of human beings, until very recently, the island had no formal visitor entry fee.
None at all.
Yeah, there was no daily tax. You just bought a ferry ticket, you showed up, you existed.
Yeah.
But that era just ended.
It did.
As of February 1st, 2026, the local government implemented a new daily tourism ecological fee. Foreign tourists now pay 150 Philippine pesos per day, which is about $2.70. And domestic tourists pay 100 pesos.
Now, I know what you might be thinking listening to this. $2.70 a day is like nothing.
Right, it's half the price of an iced latte.
Exactly. But the monetary value of the fee is entirely irrelevant here. What matters is the mechanism it represents. This fee is a vital economic signal.
How so?
Well, it is the local government formally, institutionally acknowledging that they have a massive, lucrative tourism economy that requires active, centralized management.
So they're basically waking up to what they have.
Right. They are shifting their perspective from, people just happen to be visiting our island to, we have a highly monetizable asset and we need to extract revenue from the foot traffic to sustain our infrastructure.
Okay, but I have to push back a little here. I mean, a $2.70 fee isn't going to suddenly fund a massive international mega resort, is it? How does such a small fee act as this apocalyptic first domino of mass commercialization?
Because of the historical precedent it sets in the investment market. If you track the development cycles of comparable Southeast Asian destinations, places like Palawan in the Philippines or Koh Phangan in Thailand,
Oh, sure.
or even the Komodo region in Indonesia, the introduction of a formalized ecological tax is almost always the catalyst event.
Wow, really?
Yeah, it removes the destination from the informal economy category. When a local government standardizes taxation, they begin standardizing infrastructure.
Like the money goes somewhere.
Exactly. They start paving the smaller roads, improving the power grid, institutionalizing waste management. And once that institutional framework is visible, foreign and domestic developers feel safe moving their capital in.
So it's like a green light for investors.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Historically, within 18 to 24 months of a localized fee like this going live, you see a dramatic, permanent upward spike in land valuation, accommodation prices, and food costs.
So the guy renting out the $15 a night beach shack realizes his land is suddenly worth a fortune.
Yep.
He sells it to a developer, and next year it's a $150 a night boutique eco-lodge.
Precisely. The infrastructure upgrades to meet the newly acknowledged demand, the aesthetic gets polished, and the original budget traveler, the backpacker who put the island on the map in the first place, is systemically priced out.
That makes total sense.
This is why understanding the underlying economics of a destination is crucial for you. It tells you exactly when to go. For Siquijor, the window of extreme affordability and raw authenticity is actively, visibly closing.
But there is still one massive geographical reality that is acting as a brake pedal on that development, right? I like to think of it as Siquijor's moat.
The moat, yes.
Yeah, because the island is 341 square kilometers. It sits right in the middle of the Central Visayas, flanked by massive economic hubs like Cebu and Negros Oriental. Yet, Siquijor has no airport. None. You cannot fly there.
And that geographical friction is the island's ultimate protective barrier. In the mechanics of modern global tourism, an airport is the ultimate accelerator of gentrification.
Oh, absolutely.
The moment a runway is poured that can handle a Boeing 737, the demographic of the island changes overnight. The absence of an airport filters out the casual, low-effort traveler. It demands a significant investment of time and patience.
It demands you cross the moat.
Exactly.
And crossing that moat brings us to the first major logistical reality check of this island. Let's talk about the friction of arrival, because getting on the island is incredibly stressful, and it requires navigating a very specific trap. Let's break down the routing.
Let's do it.
Usually, your best bet is to fly into Dumaguete Airport code DGT, on a quick domestic flight from Manila. From there, you flag down a local tricycle for a 5-minute ride to the Dumaguete Pier. That will cost you about 80 to 120 pesos.
Which is a very straightforward, frictionless transition from air to ground.
Right. But then you hit the water. You have two main ferry options. You have the fast-craft ferries, companies like OceanJet or Montenegro Lines. These are enclosed, air-conditioned catamarans that take about 45 minutes and cost between 350 and 420 pesos, roughly $6 to $7.50.
Okay, not bad.
Or, if you want to save money, there is a massive, slow, roll-on, roll-off vehicle ferry. That takes 3.5 hours, but it only costs 150 pesos. If you're coming further north, like Cebu City, you can catch a fast craft from there, which is a 4-hour ride and costs 500 to 700 pesos. Now, on paper, this sounds amazing. Just a breezy, romantic, island-hopping adventure.
But the physical reality of maritime travel in the Visayas is completely divorced from that idealized narrative. This is where we run into the phenomenon of the ferry blackout.
I really want to emphasize this for everyone listening, because the island-hopping aesthetic you see online completely omits the reality of sitting on a sweltering concrete dock, staring at a departures board that suddenly goes blank. The online ferry schedules are, at best, a mild suggestion.
They are absolutely not a guarantee.
No.
The unpredictability is systemic here. Sudden cancellations are a daily reality, and they happen entirely unannounced. Yes, they happen during the wet season when typhoons roll through, but they also happen frequently during the dry season due to minor, localized weather shifts.
Wait, really? Just minor weather shifts?
Yeah, because the Philippine Coast Guard has incredibly strict regulations regarding wind shear and wave height for these specific fast craft vessels. If the wind chops up the channel even slightly, the Coast Guard grounds the fleet.
That is wild.
Furthermore, if a ferry doesn't have enough passengers to justify the fuel cost, companies will quietly combine departures or cancel a run altogether. And because the digital infrastructure isn't fully integrated, no one sends a push notification to your phone.
Wait, so if I have a ticket for 2:00 p.m., I just show up at the port, and the guy at the desk just casually says, "Sorry, no boats today. What do I do?"
You sit on your luggage and wait.
You're kidding.
I'm serious. And the cascading logistical failure of that moment is devastating to a tightly planned itinerary. Because imagine the reverse scenario. You are on Siquijor and you need to take the ferry back to Dumaguete to catch your flight home to Manila.
Okay.
If that morning ferry is canceled due to wind, you are physically stranded on the island. You miss your domestic flight. And missing that connection means you are paying $60 to $180 in rebooking fees, which completely wipes out whatever money you saved by choosing a budget destination.
Wow. So if the maritime schedules are essentially a work of fiction, how do you mathematically plan a trip? You can't just cross your fingers and hope the wind doesn't blow?
You have to implement a strategy of defensive scheduling.
Defensive scheduling.
Yes. This is a non-negotiable rule for Siquijor. You must build a mandatory 24-hour buffer between leaving the island and taking any onward flight.
Okay, so essentially padding your trip.
Exactly. If your flight out of Dumaguete is on a Tuesday afternoon, you leave Siquijor on Monday morning, period. It does not matter how perfectly blue the sky looks. You cross the channel a day early, you spend the night in Dumaguete, and you eliminate the maritime variable from your flight day.
That is such a good tip.
Furthermore, always book the fast craft for your departure, never the slow ferry, to minimize your time exposed to sudden weather changes.
Okay, so you execute your defensive scheduling, you navigate the moat, you survive the blackout risk, you finally arrive at the port in Siquijor town. And this brings up a psychological phenomenon that I find absolutely fascinating, the 24-hour arc of arriving on this island.
Oh, yeah. The cognitive dissonance between what you expect to feel and what you actually feel in those first few hours is incredibly sharp.
Exactly. Because you step off this boat, you've been traveling for a day and a half, you're exhausted, and the arrival is deeply underwhelming.
It really is.
You are standing in a dusty, sun-baked port. Yes, there is a stunning old Spanish colonial church right by the water, the St. Francis of Assisi parish, built out of coral stone in the 1870s. But the town itself feels industrial and dead.
Yeah, it's not what you picture.
Right. There are no shiny tourist kiosks. There are no taxis lined up. There's no Uber, no Grab. Just a bunch of idling tricycles, the smell of diesel from the ferry, and the scent of wood smoke from local canteens. You're standing there dragging your suitcase through the gravel thinking, did I make a massive mistake?
Yeah.
Where's the pristine paradise I saw on my phone?
What you are experiencing in that moment is a neurological reset. Your brain has been conditioned by modern travel infrastructure to expect immediate performative gratification.
Right, like when you land at a big tourist hub.
Exactly. When you land in Phuket or Bali, the destination immediately puts on a show for you. There are greeters, air-conditioned lounges, and an immediate aesthetic payoff. Siquijor's port does none of that. It is a functional maritime hub for a local population. The disappointment you feel is actually just your brain processing the sheer lack of performative tourism.
But then the arc shifts. You rent a motorbike at the port, you strap your bag to the back, you leave that dusty road behind, and you hit the coastal highway heading west toward the town of San Juan.
Best feeling ever.
And suddenly the entire world changes in high definition. The ocean on your left is this brilliant, impossible turquoise. On your right, you have these massive, vibrant red fire trees lining the road. You pass through tiny local barangays, these small villages where the only ambient noise is a rooster crowing or kids playing basketball on a dirt court.
Yeah, it's magical.
And by the time the sun sets on that very first day, your brain does a complete 180-degree turn. You stop wondering if the friction of getting here was worth it. You start wondering why you didn't do this 5 years ago.
It is the purest dopamine hit of genuine discovery. You have successfully navigated the friction, and your reward is a landscape that feels entirely authentic and untouched by the industrial tourism machine.
And the thing is, that authenticity isn't just about the palm trees and the water. It extends deep into the social fabric of the island. Once you escape the port, you enter an island that is heavily defined by a profound, unique spiritual culture.
Yes.
And this brings us to the core identity of Siquijor. This is the stuff that affects everything from your physical safety to the exact month you should book your trip. Let's unpack the magic, the mysticism, and a massive, localized pricing trap waiting for you in April.
We have to start by taking the island's reputation seriously. Throughout the entire Philippine archipelago, Siquijor is universally known as the island of witches, sorcerers, and healers.
Which is so cool.
It is, and it is vital to understand that this is not a modern marketing gimmick invented to sell woven bracelets to backpackers. This is a centuries-old, deeply entrenched anthropological reality.
They're called the mananabal, the traditional folk healers.
Correct. And how this practice functions is a brilliant study in cultural synthesis. It is a unique, highly specific blend of pre-colonial animist beliefs.
Animist beliefs.
Yeah, like the indigenous understanding that spirits inhabit the natural world, the ancient balete trees, the rivers, and that is fused directly with the Catholic rituals brought over by Spanish colonizers in the 16th century.
Oh, wow. So it's a mix.
You will not find this exact synthesis anywhere else in the country to this degree. You have local healers utilizing indigenous herbal medicines, roots, and physical extraction techniques, while simultaneously reciting Latin Catholic prayers and using religious iconography.
And this all culminates in a massive island-wide event every single year, doesn't it? The annual Holy Week Healing Festival. In 2026, this took place from April 1st to the 4th, centered high up in the mountains at the Mount Bandalan National Park. It draws shamans, herbalists, and spiritual seekers from across the entire country.
Which brings us to the most dangerous logistical oversight a traveler can make, the Holy Week price ambush.
Yes, because this festival creates a localized, massive surge in domestic and spiritual tourism. But if you are an international traveler sitting in London or New York, you have no idea this is happening.
None.
You go onto an algorithmic booking platform in March, you search for a room in early April, and the interface looks completely normal. The algorithm doesn't wave a giant red flag saying, "Warning,
Yeah.
you're booking during the largest localized cultural event of the year."
And because Siquijor operates largely without formalized government-mandated price controls on short-term rentals, the fundamental laws of supply and demand are weaponized against you.
It's brutal.
An accommodation that normally costs 800 pesos on a quiet Tuesday in March will suddenly algorithmically spike to 2,500 or even 3,500 pesos during Holy Week.
That is a 200 to 300% markup overnight.
Exactly. Every single guest house and homestay within a 5-kilometer radius of the main tourist hub of San Juan fills up months in advance.
You literally read accounts of international backpackers sleeping on the concrete benches at the ferry terminal because they showed up during Holy Week, assuming they could just walk into a hostel and find a bed. It's a complete logistical nightmare.
It is a textbook failure of relying on global algorithms for local travel. The booking interface is blind to local cultural context. The actionable takeaway here is absolute. You must manually cross-reference the dates of Holy Week before you lock in any flights.
So if you aren't going for the festival, just stay away.
Right. If you are not traveling to Siquijor specifically to participate in the Healing Festival, shift your itinerary. Move your trip to February or push it to early May. You will experience the exact same pristine island. You can still consult with the exact same healers in their villages, but you will pay a third of the price and have the beaches entirely to yourself.
But let me ask you a skeptical question. Because we see this all over the world, culture being commodified for social media. Is this witchcraft and healing reputation still a genuine day-to-day cultural practice? Or has it just devolved into a performative act for Instagram? You see endless videos of tourists getting healed on the beach.
It is a vital distinction to make. There are two completely parallel realities operating on the island. There is authentic cultural practice, and there is performative transactional tourism.
Okay, so how do you spot the difference?
If you arrive at the Dumaguete ferry terminal and a stranger approaches you, offering an immediate traditional healing session for 1,500 to 3,000 pesos, that is not an authentic mananabal. That is a theatrical performance designed to separate you from your cash. Legitimate folk healers do not operate as aggressive touts at the port.
They aren't standing by the tricycles holding cardboard signs.
Exactly. An authentic consultation happens in the healer's private home, usually tucked away in inland villages like Paliton or Lassi. The session is conducted entirely in the local language, Cebuano, which means you often need a trusted contact from your guest house to accompany you and translate.
That sounds incredible.
It is. It involves genuine physical assessments, traditional herbal prescriptions, and occasionally practices like bolo bolo, where the healer uses a glass of water, a bamboo tube, and a black stone to theoretically extract negative energy.
Wow. And the cost?
Importantly, an authentic session usually costs a very modest, respectful donation around 200 to 500 pesos. If you engage ethically by asking a local guest house owner for a legitimate community referral, you are participating in a living, breathing tradition rather than buying a hollow photo op.
Here is where this deep dive gets truly wild for me, though. This deep-seated belief system isn't just about personal health. It actually functions as a massive, island-wide social stabilizing force.
It is a brilliant sociological phenomenon. If we analyze the macro-level impact of these mystical beliefs, they directly statistically influence the local crime rate. Yes, Siquijor is exceptionally safe regarding property crime, break-ins, and petty theft. And the reason isn't a massive police presence. The safety is derived from stigma and superstition.
So they're literally scared of being cursed.
Yes, the ingrained local belief that wronging someone, like stealing a tourist's camera or cheating a neighbor, could result in the victim placing a literal fatal curse upon you, acts as a far more powerful psychological deterrent than any formal law enforcement. The mysticism provides an unintended, highly effective protective blanket for visitors.
That is just incredible. The entire island is functionally protected by the fear of witchcraft. But we have to be clear that stabilizing force only protects you from theft. It does not protect you from gravity, and it doesn't protect you from the ocean.
That's very true.
Which brings us to the daily reality of navigating this island. Because while you won't get robbed, moving around Siquijor comes with its own set of very real physical and financial hazards.
Yes, the absence of violent crime should never be confused with an absence of physical danger. Let's look at the mechanical reality of transport.
Okay, transport. As we established earlier, you can't just pull out your phone and call an Uber. The standard default way to move around is renting a scooter or motorbike. That runs about 350 to 500 pesos a day, roughly $6 to $9.
Very cheap.
Super cheap. But if you absolutely refuse to ride a scooter, you can hail intertown tricycles for 50 to 150 pesos a trip, or you can rent a private multicab, which is basically a small open-air minivan with a local driver, for 1,500 to 2,000 pesos a day.
And that multi-cab option is highly recommended for families or anyone who isn't highly experienced on two wheels. Because the primary physical risk on Siquijor is not crime, it is the road itself.
Is it because the roads aren't paved? I mean, I know a lot of islands have rough roads.
Well, the main circumferential road is paved, but there are massive hazards. You are dealing with sudden patches of deep gravel, poorly maintained sections, especially along the northern coast, and the reality of sudden torrential weather changes that turn the pavement incredibly slick.
So it's easy to wipe out.
Extremely easy. But the most glaring systemic danger is the helmet standard.
Oh, right.
Due to supply chain issues in the provinces and a lack of strict enforcement, many rental operators provide helmets that offer absolutely zero structural integrity. They are essentially thin plastic hats designed solely to avoid a traffic ticket, not to survive an impact.
The advice here is hardcore. If you want to survive the gravel roads, you have to buy your own real DOT-approved helmet in Dumaguete for 400 to 600 pesos before you even get on the ferry. That is how bad the rental equipment is.
It is a $10 investment that drastically alters your survival probability. And alongside the road risks, you have to factor in the water risks.
Right, because the ocean is not a swimming pool.
Exactly. There are 0 lifeguards on Siquijor's beaches. Places like Paliton Beach are visually stunning, but the underwater topography means rip currents can form and shift rapidly. Paliton Beach is famous for its concrete cliff-jumping platforms, but the water depth fluctuates wildly with the tides, requiring you to actively consult locals before you jump.
You can't just dive in.
No, you really can't. Furthermore, the monsoon shifts bring a seasonal presence of jellyfish, particularly from October through January.
And here's the kicker, right? If you crash your bike or get stung by a box jellyfish, the healthcare infrastructure is severely limited. The Siquijor Provincial Hospital is equipped for minor lacerations and basic care. But if you need an MRI, complex surgery, or specialized antivenom, you have to be medically evacuated.
Yes, which is a big deal.
You have to get put on a stretcher, loaded back onto that 45-minute fast craft, and transported across the channel to the Philippine University Medical Center in Dumaguete, which means having comprehensive travel insurance with explicit medical evacuation coverage is not a luxury option here. It is a fundamental requirement of entry.
Precisely. It's just not worth the risk otherwise. But beyond the physical risks of the road and the reef, there is a very specific systemic financial risk related to navigating the island's attractions.
Ah, yes. The eco-fee double collection trap. I find this fascinating because it perfectly highlights how human opportunism works.
It really does.
Think back to that 150 peso daily tourism ecological fee we discussed. The one you pay at the port the moment you arrive, which is supposed to legally cover your environmental impact for your entire stay.
Yes, the formalized, government-mandated tax.
Well, tourists are driving their rented motorbikes up to popular local attractions, places like the Cambugahay Falls or the entrance to Paliton Beach, and they are being stopped by local opportunists standing by the road, demanding a second eco-fee payment of 30 to 100 pesos just to park or walk down the trail.
Now, we need to be analytically precise here. These natural sites do have legitimate, highly affordable entrance fees, usually around 30 pesos, to maintain the trails.
Sure.
But scammers are specifically confusing newly arrived tourists by co-opting the institutional language. They call their unofficial shakedown an eco-fee, mimicking the exact phrasing of the port tax to give it a veneer of authority.
It is exactly like internet microtransactions. You know when you buy a premium app, but then you have to keep paying $2 here, $3 there just to unlock the basic features?
Yeah, that's a perfect analogy.
It's infuriating. And the psychology of it is brilliant on the scammer's part. It's a small enough amount of money, maybe 50 cents, that most foreign travelers, especially those who don't want to cause an ugly scene in a developing country, just hand over the coins to avoid conflict. But if you get hit with that fake fee 3 times a day for a 10-day trip, you're bleeding cash. And more importantly, it deeply sours the psychological experience of the island.
It is the socioeconomics of institutional friction. Whenever a government implements a sudden, sweeping new tax structure, it creates a temporary window of informational chaos. Local opportunists naturally step into that chaos to extract undocumented revenue from confused visitors.
So how do you actually handle it? You don't want to be the angry foreigner screaming at a local over 50 cents.
The solution relies on systemic proof. When you pay your official 150 peso fee at the port, they hand you a physical stamped receipt. You must keep that piece of paper on your person at all times.
Just carry it with you everywhere.
Everywhere. When you arrive at a waterfall, read the official printed signage for the actual entrance fee. If an individual approaches you outside the gate demanding an additional eco fee, you simply pull out your official port receipt, show it to them calmly, and politely decline the secondary charge. It is entirely about understanding the mechanical rules of the system so you don't become passive revenue.
That is great advice. Keep the receipt, hold your ground with a smile. Now, speaking of where your money actually goes, let's talk about where you sleep. Let's break down exactly what your budget buys on Siquijor, because the definition of luxury on this island is completely different from what you might expect.
To understand the accommodation market, you first have to understand the geography. The island's lodging is heavily segregated into 3 distinct zones, and choosing the wrong zone will entirely dictate the rhythm and success of your trip.
Right. Zone 1 is Siquijor town, which is where the ferry drops you off. And the consensus is clear. This is a purely functional zone. It is a logistical transit hub. You spend a maximum of 1 night here if you have a 6:00 a.m. ferry to catch the next morning. It is absolutely not where you base a week-long vacation.
Definitely not.
Zone 2 is San Juan, located on the southwest coast. This is the primary functional hub. It has the densest concentration of food. It is physically close to the Tubod Marine Sanctuary, and it's where the vast majority of mid-range hotels are clustered. And then you have Zone 3, the Paliton Beach area, slightly further west. It is much quieter. It lacks large supermarkets, but it provides immediate walking access to the finest white sand on the entire island.
And within those specific geographic zones, the accommodations are stratified into very rigid financial tiers. If we examine the baseline backpacker tier, which runs roughly $12 to $15 a night, you are looking at functional properties like Louisa and Sons in Siquijor Town or Islander's Paradise near San Juan. The highest value in this bracket is often found at places like Bahal Bar near Paliton Beach, which offers garden-facing rooms for around 800 to 1,000 pesos.
But let's be brutally honest about the physical reality of a $15 a night room. You are not getting a plush mattress. You are getting a localized oscillating fan, a shared bathroom down the hall, cold water showers, and the very real likelihood of intermittent electricity. There is absolutely no air conditioning at that price floor.
Correct. It is shelter, not comfort. If you move up to the mid-range tier, which spans roughly $45 to $95 a night, the infrastructure improves significantly. You find properties like Charisma in San Juan or the famous Coco Grove Beach Resort. Coco Grove is essentially the island's most mature established property.
Yeah, that's a famous one.
It offers multiple swimming pools, highly reliable air conditioning, and a massive in-house restaurant.
But here is where that gentrification timeline rears its head again. Coco Grove's prices have aggressively increased by 22% just since 2024.
Which perfectly validates our earlier thesis regarding the domino effect of formalized tourism. The mid-range market is actively gentrifying, testing the price ceiling of incoming foreign capital. Then, moving slightly higher, you have the family tier, $60 to $120 a night.
Okay, so that's a step up.
Yeah, this includes places like Villa Marmarine, which offers large, self-contained multi-room units, or Coral Cay, which is geographically situated to offer incredibly calm, shallow beach access, perfect for toddlers.
Okay, but let's play devil's advocate here. What if I am an executive? I've been working 80-hour weeks, I have a massive budget, and I want absolute frictionless 5-star treatment. I see places online like Salamanca or Kiwi Dive Resort charging $90 to $180 a night. Is that the Siquijor luxury tier?
This requires a very harsh reality check regarding infrastructure. Siquijor currently caps out at a standard that would be considered merely mid-range in heavily developed markets like Bali, Phuket, or Palawan.
Wow, really? So no true 5-star?
There is no genuine international 5-star infrastructure on the island, period. There are no sprawling luxury spas with hydrotherapy circuits. There are no high-end dedicated concierge services arranging private helicopter tours.
Right.
A place like Salamanca is undeniably beautiful and premium, but it is boutique premium. It is not an international 5-star resort. The logistical supply chain required to maintain a true 5-star property, importing luxury linens, maintaining massive industrial generators, sourcing high-end culinary ingredients daily simply does not exist yet due to the lack of an airport.
So if I have a $500 a night budget and I expect Egyptian cotton sheets, flawless high-speed Wi-Fi, and a perfectly shaken martini brought to my cabana. Should I even bother crossing the moat? Or will I just be constantly deeply annoyed by the friction?
If your primary objective is high-end, frictionless infrastructural luxury, the answer is a definitive no. Do not travel to Siquijor. You will be miserable.
Just skip it entirely.
Yeah, you should redirect your capital to El Nido, or book a private island resort like a Monpulo. Siquijor is fundamentally not built for the frictionless luxury seeker. However, it is crucial to understand that from a sociological standpoint, this exact lack of high-end infrastructure is precisely what protects the island.
Oh, that makes sense.
The physical ceiling on luxury prevents the rapid displacement of the local culture. It keeps the massive multinational resort developers at bay.
It all comes down to the is it worth it matrix. If you are a backpacker spending maybe $37 to $40 a day total, Siquijor is an absolute definitive yes. You are getting unparalleled beauty for pennies. If you're a mid-range couple dropping maybe $170 a day combined, it is a massive yes. You get reliable air conditioning, direct beach access, and incredible food, all for a fraction of what a weekend in Hawaii costs. But if you are a true luxury seeker expecting to drop over $260 a day per person, it's a hard pass. You will be frustrated by the power cuts and the gravel roads.
Exactly. The physical reality of the destination must align with your tolerance for logistical friction.
And this massive divide between the local reality and the tourist expectation is most glaringly obvious when you look at how the island actually eats and how it connects to the outside world. Let's shift gears and talk about the parallel economies operating side by side on this tiny rock. Let's look at the food supply chains and the brutal reality of being a digital nomad here.
The culinary systems on Siquijor provide a perfect, tangible illustration of economic segregation within a developing tourism market. You are looking at two completely different, non-intersecting supply chains operating on the exact same stretch of road.
Right. On one side of the coin, you have the deeply authentic local food system. These are the carinderias, the small, unpretentious, open-front eateries clustered along the main highway. You walk in, point at the metal pots, and they serve you a massive mound of rice with whatever the daily ulam, the viand, happens to be. It could be freshly fried fish, a rich pork adobo, or a deeply savory chicken tinola soup.
Sounds amazing.
It is. And a full, hot, nutritionally dense meal here costs between 60 and 100 pesos. That is literally $1.10 to $1.80. Or, if you want to cook, you can walk into the public market in Siquijor town at 6 a.m. and buy a whole kilo of fresh fish pulled straight from the Visayan Sea hours earlier for 150 to 200 pesos.
And then, situated literally right across the street, you have the institutionalized tourist food system. This is primarily concentrated along the San Juan beachfront strip and nested inside the higher-end dive resorts.
Right. You sit down at a bamboo table with a view of the sunset, you order a grilled seafood platter, maybe a craft burger or a plate of pasta, and suddenly the bill is 350 to 600 pesos per person.
Now, obviously, basic economics dictate that you are paying a premium for the beachfront real estate, the ambient lighting, the English-speaking staff, and the overarching overhead of running a resort. But there is a very specific, deeply frustrating pitfall embedded in this system: the port seafood trap.
Oh, this one makes me so angry because it is so brazen. At the restaurants clustered right near the Dumaguete Ferry terminal, they are charging newly arrived tourists 500 to 800 pesos for massive local seafood platters.
Let me guess.
But the fish they are serving isn't even from Siquijor. They are cooking frozen, industrially processed fish that was shipped over on the ferry from the mainland in Dumaguete. Meanwhile, literally 2 streets back, hidden from the main tourist drag at the local public market, you can buy the actual wildly fresh local catch for a quarter of the price.
This is a textbook example of informational asymmetry in a tourism economy. The newly arrived traveler assumes quite logically that because they are standing on a remote tropical island, absolutely all the seafood must be fresh and locally sourced.
Right. Why wouldn't it be?
The opportunistic restaurant owner leverages that naive assumption to sell inferior, imported, frozen product at a massive artificial markup.
You are paying premium island prices for frozen mainland fish. It is an absolute hustle. But if you want to bypass the hustle, you have to seek out the hyper-local flavors. You have to try bucayo, which is this incredible, dense coconut candy cooked down in rich palm sugar. You buy it in these little plastic bags sold by grandmothers by the side of the road for 40 to 60 pesos. And you have to try tuba, the local coconut wine, which ferments naturally and costs about 30 pesos a glass.
Engaging with those micro-local systems isn't just about saving a few dollars. It physically roots you in the actual living economy of the island, rather than trapping you in the imported, highly priced simulation of it.
Speaking of imports, though, what about importing your job? Because Siquijor, on paper, looks like the ultimate paradise for a remote tech worker. A digital nomad looks at the budget breakdown and sees they could rent a room, eat well, and live on a beach for $950 to $1,150 a month. That sounds like a dream.
Yeah, it does.
But there is a massive structural trap waiting for anyone who needs to open a laptop, isn't there?
Oh, definitely. The telecommunications infrastructure is a profound, insurmountable bottleneck. The physical reality of transmitting data to a remote island without a massive underwater fiber optic grid is severe.
Just really slow speeds.
Well, during the mid-morning, if you are at one of the better-equipped guest houses, you might pull down 15 to 25 megabits per second. It's functional. But in the evening, the moment the sun goes down and every single tourist and local on the island logs onto the network simultaneously, the bandwidth completely collapses. It regularly drops to 2 to 5 millipees.
Which means if you have a mandatory Zoom call with your engineering team in San Francisco at 8 p.m., your video is going to freeze, your audio will clip, and you're going to look like a highly aggressive, malfunctioning PowerPoint presentation.
Exactly. It is entirely structurally unworkable for bandwidth-heavy remote work. If your livelihood requires constant high-speed connectivity to a global server, Siquijor will break your professional patience within 48 hours.
It is an involuntary digital detox. You show up with a grand plan to code the next big Silicon Valley startup from a hammock, and by day 3, you are just staring blankly at a palm tree because your Slack channel won't refresh.
Pretty much.
And it makes you wonder, how does a modern hyper-connected traveler even adapt to an environment like this? There aren't even massive grocery stores to wander around in. There's no massive SM supermarket. There is no Robinson's Mall. You have the Island Supermart, which essentially stocks 20 peso bottles of drinking water, basic instant noodles, and soap.
Adapting to it requires a complete paradigm shift. You have to intellectually accept the friction. But more importantly, from a sociological standpoint, we have to recognize that this specific technological and infrastructural friction is actually a highly effective protective mechanism.
Like the moat again?
Yes. It actively, aggressively repels the long-term high-income tech worker crowd. It prevents the island from being overrun by crypto traders and app developers, thereby preserving Siquijor as a short-term, disconnected creative retreat. It stops it from turning into a congested, hyper-gentrified co-working hub like Canggu in Bali or Chiang Mai in Thailand. The bad internet is literally saving the island's soul.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. The bad Wi-Fi is a feature, not a bug. So if you can't sit on your laptop and code, and you can't spend your days getting hot stone massages at a 5-star spa because they don't exist, what do you actually do with your time here?
This brings us to the culmination of our deep dive, the highlights, the disappointments, and the alternatives. Let's curate the ultimate itinerary, separating the genuinely exceptional experiences from the overhyped letdowns. Curating an itinerary here requires separating aesthetic reality from social media fiction. You have to know precisely where to deploy your time.
Let's start with the absolute peak moments. Number 1, Paliton Beach at sunset. The logistical instructions are incredibly specific. You drive your rented motorbike exactly 7 kilometers west of San Juan. You must arrive at exactly 4:3 p.m.
Very specific.
Yes, you park, and you just sit on this perfect sweeping arc of white sand facing the turquoise water. You bring your own water and your own snacks because there is no massive commercial infrastructure here. There are no vendors aggressively pushing sunglasses or jet ski rentals on you. You just sit there and watch the sky catch fire, and you stay until it goes completely dark.
It is the defining aesthetic experience of Siquijor. It delivers the exact visual perfection of Boracay's famous white beach, but entirely devoid of the suffocating commercial crowding and thumping bass music.
Number 2, Cambugahay Falls. These are stunning, natural, 3-tiered limestone pools filled with opaque blue water, complete with Tarzan-style rope swings. It costs a mere 30 pesos to enter. But the timing is the critical mechanism here. You have to arrive at 8 a.m.
Let me guess, to beat the crowds.
Exactly. Because if you wait until 11 a.m., the massive tour groups who took the early ferry over from Dumaguete arrive en masse. The pools fill with hundreds of people in bright orange life jackets, and the tranquil magic is completely annihilated. Number 3, a genuine healer consultation. As we detailed, you go to a real mananabal in a village like Laozi, translating through a local contact and experiencing traditional herbal treatments.
That is the cultural anchor of the trip. It provides the anthropological weight that prevents the vacation from just being a superficial beach tour.
And number 4, the full island circumnavigation. It is exactly a 72-kilometer loop around the coastal highway on your motorbike. You witness every sleepy coastal village, you pass massive ancient belay trees, you discover unnamed white sand coves. The advice is to execute this drive on day 1 or day 2 so your brain geographically maps the island.
However, we must ruthlessly acknowledge the honest disappointments. Blindly praising a destination helps no one and sets travelers up for failure.
Exactly. Disappointment 1, Siquijor town as a base camp. Aside from that beautiful 1870s coral stone church, the town is just a hot, functional industrial port. Disappointment 2, the shallow reef bleaching right in front of San Juan.
That's a sad one.
It is. If you put your snorkel mask on right outside your $80 mid-range hotel in San Juan and swim out, you're going to be deeply depressed. You're going to see a dead, bleached gray reef. It has been decimated by shallow water heating, tourist sunscreen chemicals, and anchor damage. But do not judge the entire island's marine ecosystem on that one spot. The logistical fix is simple. You redirect yourself a 10-minute tricycle ride north to the Tubod Marine Sanctuary, where the local community enforces strict protections, the reef is vibrantly alive, and the underwater visibility is spectacular.
And the final, most profound disappointment is the one we analyzed earlier, the performative healers during peak season. The ethical degradation of watching a sacred, centuries-old indigenous practice be hollowed out and commodified into a 1,500 peso transaction for a tourist seeking an Instagram story.
So, hearing all of this laid out, bear the systemic ferry blackouts, the highly stressful defensive scheduling, the eco-fee double-charging scams, the atrocious internet bandwidth, the bleached reef in San Juan, the lack of true luxury. I have to ask a really pointed structural question. If you look at the region, there are alternatives. You could go to Apo Island, which is just a 30-minute boat ride from Dumaguete.
Oh, Apo is stunning.
It is. It costs $15 to $25 a night, and it has some of the most fiercely protected, pristine marine life and sea turtle populations in the entire Philippines. Pure, unadulterated snorkeling, but with absolutely zero witchcraft culture. Or you could go to the Camotes Islands, straight north of Cebu. It is insanely cheap, $10 to $15 a night. It has zero crowds, no Instagram fame, just perfectly quiet freshwater lakes and totally empty beaches. So if I can get a cheaper, emptier beach on Camotes or vastly superior snorkeling on Apo Island, why on earth am I dealing with Coast Guard blackouts, broken internet, and gravel roads just to go to Siquijor?
It is the ultimate question of synthesis. Siquijor is not the absolute best at any one single isolated metric. Apo Island unequivocally has better turtles. The Camotes Islands are undeniably quieter and cheaper. El Nido and Palawan has far more dramatic, towering limestone cliffs. But Siquijor offers a complete triad in a way those other destinations simply cannot match.
The triad.
Yes, it possesses undeniable world-class natural beauty. It has manageable, though admittedly highly imperfect and stressful logistics. And most crucially, it possesses a profound, living, breathing cultural dimension. That centuries-deep mysticism, the entrenched healer tradition, the utterly unique blend of pre-colonial animism and Spanish Catholicism that is a living social fabric.
Right.
It is the synthesis of those pristine white sand beaches with that unique, somewhat unsettling, deeply fascinating cultural depth that makes all the friction worthwhile. You are not just visiting a beach, you are visiting a place with a distinct, undeniable soul.
Okay, let's lock in our final actionable takeaways because we have covered a massive amount of logistical and cultural ground today. If you are listening to this right now and you are planning to book a flight to the Philippines tomorrow, here are your absolute non-negotiables. Dodge the Holy Week price surge in April unless you are specifically going for the Healing Festival. Build your mandatory non-negotiable 24-hour buffer for the ferry crossing to protect your flights. Understand that your luxury budget hard caps at mid-range infrastructural standards. Expect the internet to completely fail you every single evening. And if you choose to engage with the healer culture, do it ethically and respectfully through trusted local village referrals, not from a guy holding a cardboard sign at the ferry port.
But as we close this analysis, there is a broader, almost philosophical tension that observing Siquijor leaves us with. We started this hour by discussing that new 150 peso daily tourism ecological fee. As Siquijor introduces these formalized fees and institutionalizes its tourism economy, the local government finally gains the massive funds required to actively protect its environment. With that money, they can build modern waste management facilities, they can fund patrols to protect the reefs from illegal fishing, and they can pave the dangerous gravel roads.
Which, on paper, sounds like a universally good thing.
It is a good thing for environmental sustainability and local safety, but it raises a profound, unanswerable tension. In managing the magic, do you inevitably domesticate it? As the roads get smoother, as the internet infrastructure is upgraded with fiber optics, as the $15 guest houses are bought out and turned into $150 boutique resorts, the friction entirely disappears. And as we've seen throughout this entire discussion, it is precisely that logistical and technological friction that has acted as the moat, protecting Siquijor's authentic soul for centuries. The island is walking a razor-thin tightrope right now between vital preservation and total commercialization.
The ticking clock is loud, and the alarm is about to go off. We started this deep dive talking about our modern expectation of precision. When we travel, we want everything to be binary. We want it broken or not broken, perfect or terrible, five-star luxury or backpacker dirt. But Siquijor is the absolute definition of murky, beautiful, magical waters. The friction of getting there isn't a bug in the system. It is the moat protecting the castle. The real question is, how long until the global tourism industry builds a high-speed bridge right over it? Think about that before you book your next flight. That is the honest verdict from Phil and H.